All right. Let's see if people get the notification about this and see if we can go back live again. I don't know exactly what's going to happen. Hello? Hello? Are we here? Anybody give me a message here? Let me know if we're back on the stream. I see people joining, so that's a good sign that people actually saw the notification to come back. Let me check the chat. Thanks, Wind Up Boy. Whenever people actually show up again, I will explain what happened. Because honestly, I actually don't know what happened, but we're going to find out. All right, here we go. We see people coming back in the chat. Cool. So I have no idea what just happened. I was trying to kill Ibn. No, you're just on time for the second half of the stream because I just killed the first half by trying to kill MG, but apparently I killed OBS somehow, and I don't know exactly what I did to do that, but I think we lost some of our viewers, but hopefully the people will see the notification. Thanks, John Eastman. I appreciate that. Yeah, Appenzel says that was unexpected. Yeah, it was unexpected for me too. I was still talking. I didn't actually know that something had happened until I went back to try to see what was going on in OBS, and all of a sudden OBS was gone. I was like, what the hell? And then I realized that people were saying in the chat that I must have broken my window manager. No, actually, I'm still here. The problem is that I tried to kill MG with proced, and somehow, somehow I managed to kill my OBS instance. Kind of weird. You probably shouldn't do this particular stream in a window manager that isn't sensitive to control key-based commands. No, I actually did not. I did not actually kill the stream by killing EXWM. So it's just me killing OBS by accident. I swear to God. I swear I had my cursor on the line for MG and proced. And, well, actually, I probably didn't. You know what? I was searching through the proced buffer, and I got to the line where MG was, but I don't think I moved my cursor to it. That must be what happened. That's so stupid, man. Well, this is what happens whenever you have a high-powered computing experience like the one that I have here. You're going to shoot yourself in the foot. I do have to say, in my defense, this is probably only the first time that's actually happened in the middle of the stream. So, yay for me. A year of streaming, and it's the first time I've actually killed the stream by killing the streaming program by accident. All right, so, man, this cable is really starting to annoy me here. If you hear the buzzing, it's because I'm moving this cable around. Let's get back to it. So what we were looking for before was docs to MG so I could actually show how it works, but then I was joking that people will say that you can't figure out how to exit VI or Vim. I couldn't actually figure out how to exit MG, so there we go. Drashal says, why not upgrade the laptop to something like ThinkPad T14? Well, that didn't actually have anything to do with this problem. Marco says, this is the first time I got early to one of your streams. Actually, this is the second time I'm streaming this morning because I killed the last one. Jay says, I can't say I'm excited to try MG now. Yeah, well, me either. That's the last time I'm going to try it. Case, I killed OBS by accident. Okay, so MG. Don't try it unless you want to kill your streams. That's all I can say. What else we have here? So then XEmacs. This is probably the most interesting part of the history of Emacs forks and whatnot. So at some point, I probably actually need to look up the Wikipedia page or maybe this Emacs wiki page. Exit MG with Control C, Control X, Control C. I tried that in vterm and it didn't work. I don't know if I did something wrong. Where is the Emacs wiki page? Oh, yeah, it's there. Okay. Bill says XEmacs makes me angry for some reason. Well, it was a very contentious thing that happened in the past, so I can understand why. So there was a company called Lucid Incorporated. They decided to fork from Emacs in 1993. And this says it's one of the more notorious code forks in the history of free software, probably because it was early and public. So like one of the first big examples of someone basically saying, I'm not happy with how this project's going, I'm going to make my own fork and then maintain it myself. So let's see, positions of some of the parties involved are available below. Past and continuing discussion on this wiki. So there's someone who's very well known in the hacker community, I guess you could say, called Jamie Zawinski. You may have heard of them by their handle JWZ. They had a very, popular blog. So maybe people still read JWZ's blog. I know he still blogs, but in the 90s, a lot more people were reading JWZ's blog because he, smart person, has a lot of opinions on technology and software and whatnot. Also sort of famous for having been one of the core contributors to the Netscape browser, and also one of the people who encouraged the Netscape company to open source Netscape, which eventually became Mozilla, and we all know where Mozilla went. I mean, Mozilla was sort of like the open source free software browser for a long time, and then Firefox was the descendant of that. So Jamie Zawinski is was kind of a large figure in the free software community in the 90s, and was probably one of the people involved in forking Emacs to XEmacs. So if we look at his opinion on the schism, let's see, blah, 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 blah. So I think there was a delay in releasing Emacs 19, and was expected to integrate with various features of Epoch. What is Epoch? Another version of GNU Emacs called Epoch. So there's like another fork that I had actually not heard about. So that, plus the fact that they weren't going to release Emacs 19 anytime soon, they got tired of waiting. So they went on ahead and forked the development version of Emacs 19 and merged or put it together with this Epoch, I guess, and then made XEmacs. And then I think they actually did a lot of changes to the source code to make it more like what they wanted Emacs to be. So it is, I think it's because of these, competing motivations is why people got kind of pissed off about it at the time. I think people actually did go use XEmacs. I think that, people were maybe feeling like Emacs development was slowing down, and maybe they weren't feeling like their contributions were being accepted or their opinions weren't being heard. So they decided to start using XEmacs instead. Let's see. Even though Energize was a proprietary commercial product, all of our work on Emacs was released under the GPL. We even assigned the copyright of our work back to the FSF because we had no proprietary interest in Emacs per se. It's just a tool we wanted to use. So it seems like they were actually trying to contribute things back, but I think they had diverging opinions that led to there being more acrimony between the two sides. And then at some point, this company Lucid went out of business, and then they changed the name from Lucid Emacs to XEmacs. If you ever heard of Lucid Emacs before, XEmacs is Lucid Emacs. It's just like the new name. XEmacs is the new name for it. And I don't know about you, but if you were around in the 90s or the early 2000s, and you would see the fact that there was GNU Emacs and XEmacs often available in the software distribution channels for the various Linux distributions, you would wonder, what's the difference? And it's very easy to make the mistake to think that XEmacs somehow means that it's related to like the X Windows system, or maybe it's better for the X Windows system. But as soon as you open XEmacs and you look at it, you're like, something seems wrong here. The UI looks very dated. And in fact, I think I have a screenshot linked here, so you can sort of see what XEmacs looked like. And let's see if I can get that. Wikipedia. Where is it? There. Okay, so that's what XEmacs looked like back in the day. This was in 2009, I think. And, some very weird black and white looking icons. I don't know if it ever looked any better than this at some point, but basically the point being that if you came along a little bit later and you looked at this versus GNU Emacs, you'd be like, okay, something's wrong about this one. It looks older. So you'd probably use GNU Emacs anyway. But I think at the time when the first split happened, like Benoit says, XEmacs is really popular at that time. And a lot of people who I have spoken to in the System Crafters community and elsewhere who were around whenever this happened said that they actually did use XEmacs for a bit of time, but it's not being used by many people these days. And as Wind Up Boy mentions, which actually I show in the next slide, there was a fork of XEmacs called SEmacs, which actually is a little bit more maintained, and we'll see that in a little bit. Let's see, Kay says, my favorite thing about free software history is the mythologizing of it, the Emacs schism, the editor wars. Well, you know, whenever you have a community of people who probably watched Star Wars whenever they were growing up, and other science fiction and fantasy movies, it makes a lot of sense that events happening in the tech community would also take on such a mythological tone. Whoops. See, XEmacs had TTF font support years before GNU Emacs did. Well, that would definitely make sense why people would want to use that. Let's see. Bill says, that's exactly what I remember. I thought it was from the same people, but it was terrible looking. Brad says, I used it back in 2000 and 2003. Lynn says, don't most Windows installs look like XEmacs? Well, I guess if you're using Windows 95 still, maybe. SXEmacs still updated more recently than EXWM. Ouch. That's a sick burn. Let's see. What else? So why the schism persists? Well, it doesn't really persist, and also the site can't be reached. So I guess that just adds more credence to the idea that the schism does not persist. I mean, sure, you could say that it persists in the existence of SXEmacs, or as MVP says, Sexy Emacs. XEmacs, okay, whatever. I don't know. I mean, I wonder, does anybody here actually use SXEmacs or XEmacs, whatever you want to call it, longer than about a week? Because I've never heard of anybody using it. In fact, I've never even heard about it until Wind Up Boy told me about it today. So, yeah. Ashra says website cannot be reached. Webarchive.org. I'm not even gonna bother. Aria says, does your wife use VS Code? Yeah, more recently. Nevertheless, the schism persisted. Yeah, well, that's up for debate. Wind Up Boy says, I compiled Sexy Emacs last week and it's pretty much like XEmacs. Okay, I guess that's if people like XEmacs, or you depend on features that are there, then it totally makes sense. Oh, there's Origin of XEmacs by Richard Stallman. I did not see this. Forked version of Emacs maintained by a group. Let me actually make this bigger. You probably can't see it. Maintained by a group that does not cooperate with the GNU project. Roots of XEmacs go back to the 1990 when a programmer in charge of maintaining Emacs told me he was leaving, giving 2 weeks notice. He'd been hired away by Lucid, which wanted him to add certain features to Emacs. I guess that must have been JWZ. The job he walked away from was getting Emacs 19 ready for release. I was too busy at the time to do it myself, so I had to move someone else into the job. Emacs is a large program. Jim was not familiar with the code, needed a year to learn it to work on it efficiently, needed my help. Meanwhile, the previous Emacs maintainer brought a copy of the unreleased Emacs 19 sources to Lucid, started to add the features Lucid wanted, but he left without finishing the job. Okay, maybe this is a different person. Lucid executive asked another group of Lucid's programmers to add features to Emacs. Okay, yeah, makes sense. And started with the unreleased Emacs 19 sources, which they already had. They did not inform me that they had started working on major Emacs changes. I found out about their project only through gossip. Oh boy, such salacious gossip. I don't know if there was any, like, you know, gossip website other than maybe Slashdot, but I don't know if Slashdot even existed in, well, I think I was reading Slashdot in 1994. Let's see, Wikipedia Slashdot. I would imagine Richard Stallman was not reading Slashdot, though. Okay, it was 1997. Okay. Wait, no. Yeah, 1997. All right, makes sense. Let's see. late for discussion. They'd already halfway implemented the ideas. Okay, so basically, Lucid had their own ideas what they wanted, and I think things had diverged too much by the point that Stallman had talked to them, so they couldn't actually get them back together. Okay, a lot of stuff here. Yeah. Anyway, still, I don't know when this was written. Does it say? No. Okay. Definitely still some acrimony on Richard Stallman's part, which makes sense. Arya said it died along with SourceForge. Honestly, Slashdot is still around, and people are still posting and reading there. So I guess people who were reluctant to move to Reddit are still using Slashdot, which is honestly fine. I mean, if you have a home, no reason to leave it. The Slashdot effect. Now it's the Hacker News effect. Eventually, it'll be the System Crafters effect. I'm being partly sarcastic. By that gaming company whose name I forgot, yeah. Wind Up Boy says, I still think there's a need for the Fresh Meat software news site. I actually had a Fresh Meat shirt, if you can believe it. It was an orange, horrible looking shirt. I also had a shirt with a Linux penguin on it when I was in high school. Anyone still have a MySpace page? I hope mine doesn't exist anymore. It's probably gone. So, what else do we want to say about that here? Case says, if you have a home, no reason to leave it. Is that a country song? I'm not about to be writing any country songs today. Progressive death metal, maybe. Let's see. If you want to know more about Jamie Zawinski, since, like I mentioned, he was pretty interesting character in that time, and still is, honestly. I mean, he went from working at seminal startups in Silicon Valley to running a rave club and pizzeria, and still does to this day. So, but also still blogs about tech and whatnot. I think his latest blog post is about how he calls self-driving cars murder bots. I think I saw that today. Which honestly, might be somewhat true. Let's see, blog. Glob. The sleep deprivation is starting to rear its head. Yeah, murder bots. There you go. So anyway. Lots of profanity on that site too, if you like profanity. Hi, Anant. All right. Brad says, I love the Tux Penguin. Happy thoughts. Yeah, the Tux Penguin is a symbol of a simpler time, I would say. And a more interesting time. Brief history, blah, blah, blah. We've talked about that already a little bit. And if you want to see more about that, you can go check out the Lucid Emacs page on the Emacs wiki. And I mentioned, before that when I saw the name XEmacs, I had the entirely wrong impression about what that was supposed to mean. Okay, so, and also we mentioned the sexy Emacs, as apparently that's supposed to be pronounced. It was in 2004 when this was forked off. And there was an email that was sent to the Emacs development alias to talk about that. Arya says the Tux with the GNU head is better. I have not seen that. So Steve Youngs, I think, was the person who forked XEmacs and wanted to let Emacs Devel know about it, since that's a place where obviously people are very happy to hear about XEmacs. Let's see. To provide the open source community with a text editing and development environment that is based on XEmacs and is second to none in terms of stability, features, and innovation, and to foster a user and developer friendly project environment. Okay, so I think that second sentence is probably the more important aspect of this. I don't know if XEmacs already had started to decline a bit by the time this was written in 2004, but I think there's always been this thread where people are not very happy about how Emacs is developed, either through, the opinions of the maintainers or development processes or whatever. And this has been a recurring issue even in recent days about how people would decide to create a fork. And we'll see more about that in a little bit. Let's see. I mean, who doesn't love a daemon? Are we speaking about, the BSD daemon? General superiority of Chuck the BSD daemon proves that mascots don't have bearing. Yeah, but I was always wanting to try a BSD because I thought the little demon guy was cool looking. But For some reason, I never did. Probably because I just had this impression that it was going to be harder to use. So who knows? Demon, yeah. Benoit says Craftimax. Let's fork it. Yeah, I don't know if I want to get into that whole game. I'm already having enough trouble fixing bugs in EXWM. Let's see. Before we go any further, please, if you wish to follow up on this message, blah, blah, blah. I believe that XEmacs even 21.4 is too broken and unstable. I want to make some fairly radical changes that I know the review board won't go for. I want a development environment that doesn't get boiled down in politics. Well, if you don't want politics, don't use free software because it's all politics. Systemax. That's not bad. Wind Up Boy says, GNU Emacs is ground zero for RMS most intransigent opinions. Well, yeah, if you go see, you know, what's going on in Emacs Devel, RMS is still there and having very strong opinions about a lot of things. However, I don't want to discount the guy just for having strong opinions, but, you know, you can have strong opinions and still have wrong opinions. Pronounce Systemax. Oh, now that sounds even cooler. So I think Ashraz, I'm going to make you the chief executive of naming. In the, what do we call it? The imaginary System Crafters Incorporated. Case says everything is political. In theory, it does boil down to that. Benoit says, I'm under the impression it's maybe the last place he still has a voice. I'm kind of in agreement with you there. Yeah, anyway, lots of history here. If you want to look at this email that I mentioned in the show notes that I'll link after the stream is over in one of the stream locations that that has happened today. You can sort of see more reasoning behind that if you're interested. And also, if you end up trying Sexy Emacs or SX Emacs and you have some opinions about it, please feel free to share them with me because I've never used it. Probably not going to do it today because let's see if it's in Geeks. I'm pretty sure it's not in Geeks. I think I checked before. Even XEmacs is not in Geeks. Come on, Geeks Repl, let's go. Come on. There we go. XEmacs, nope, not here. SX Emacs, nope, not here. What is SX? Start an Xorg server. Whoa. Is that something new? Sorry, a little bit of a digression here. I need to figure out if this is something that's useful for people who want to use StartX in Geeks. Probably not. Okay. So back to the notes. All right, Aquamax. If you've ever used a Mac and you have... If you've ever used a Mac and you've tried to download Emacs before, you've probably run across Aquamax. This is another fork that was actually meant to improve how Emacs operates in Mac OS or OS X, or even, what was it called before then? Because it wasn't OS X. It may be, who knows? But anyway, the idea is that Jose says, yes, it is. You can use it to start X and Geeks. That's great because people have had a lot of trouble with that over the years, which is something people want to know. Wind Up Boy says next step. Was it before OS 10? Was it still next step? Okay. So Aquamax was a fork that was trying to sort of integrate Emacs with the sort of interface of the Mac operating system or Mac desktop environment, whatever it was at the time. And it sort of stays behind the latest stable Emacs. Like right now, the current release of, or I guess the upcoming release of Aquamax is 3.6, and it's based on Emacs 25, which I want to say came out probably 3 or 4 years ago at least. So probably not something that you would use if you wanted to have the latest and greatest Emacs features. I actually had trouble figuring out which Emacs I was supposed to use on Mac OS back when I started using Emacs again, because I was using a MacBook at the time, and I saw there was an Aquamax, and for whatever reason I assumed that maybe this is the Mac OS port or the OS 10 port of Emacs, and I tried it, and I don't know, I couldn't really tell because I wasn't really an Emacs expert at the time, but apparently it's not what you want if you want the the actual GNU Emacs with the latest features. And if you do want that, the build of GNU Emacs for Mac OS, or the ones that you can find on Homebrew, etc., they're great. I've used it just fine, no problems. Bill says that Emacs 25 first arrived in September 2016, which means it's 5 years old at this point. Almost exactly. Ashra says, I see you're going to be the chief of naming at System Crafters Inc. Well, I already said that Ashraz is the chief of naming, right? Anyway, let's see. Windup Boy says Emacs development tempo has increased substantially since RMS stepped down as a maintainer. Yeah, I think he's done that a couple times by now, right? So let's see. Eric says, started using Mac at work. Emacs Plus package on Homebrew is spectacular. I don't know exactly what is in Emacs Plus, but I've also seen people say that you should use that. So that's cool. So let's see. Beyond 3.6, Aquamax will be updated to run with a fairly recent version of Emacs 27 or 28, depending on the when development catches up. Well, honestly, I feel like it's going to be a little bit difficult to catch up to the code base of Emacs 28 from 25, but more power to them if they can do that. Aria says John Wigley is a maintainer now. Yeah, John Wigley is supposed to be the lead maintainer, but I see Eli and Stefan Manier, I think, more frequently talking on Emacs Devel, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are de facto maintainers, I guess. I don't really follow Emacs Devel very closely, so I'm not sure exactly what's going on right now. So let's check out the Aquamax website real quick. The System Crafter Schism of 2021. Yeah, so we're going to have System on one side and Crafters on the other. The system will be more like the Borg. All right, so let's say Aquamax. FYI, John pronounces Eli's name as Ellie. Well, it could be. Could be. I think Eli or Ellie is from Israel, so it could be that it's a different pronunciation. Let's see. Not much information right here. What's Aquamax? That's a great question to answer. User-friendly build of the powerful Emacs text editor. Aquamax integrates with the Mac and offers the same comforts that any application on the Mac provides, which honestly, to me, doesn't make sense, because Emacs is its own environment, and the point of using Emacs is to use the Emacs environment. So why do you care about whether it's more integrated with the Mac, unless it's for things like file dialogues and stuff, which, once again, I would say, why do you care? Because if you have to open a dialogue, you're just getting completely thrown out of the normal Emacs environment. So anyway, once again, my opinion, I feel like integrating with the host operating system is not the goal. It's you want this environment, not the host OS. Only at the low level. You want eShell to work, you want file operations to work, but Bill says, did they just use user-friendly and Emacs in the same sentence? Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, what exactly are they doing to make it more user-friendly? One thing I did see is that they apparently have their own way for configuration, like different configuration files. Like, it's not init.el. Maybe you could use init.el, but there's a different one instead. So I don't know. Seems kind of interesting to me to basically say that our goal is to make a user-friendly build of Emacs and also to integrate it with Mac OS. I just want to use GNU Emacs, man. But maybe it's helpful to get other people to use Emacs. But honestly, if you try to put a veneer over GNU Emacs and to try to tell someone, hey, this is a user-friendly version of Emacs, are they really using Emacs? Like, if you basically turn Emacs into any other standard text editor by configuration with the same key bindings and more friendly UI, then you're sort of robbing the person of the opportunity to learn Emacs for what it's actually good for and what it's meant to be used for. Once again, in my opinion. So I don't want to say that, these people have the wrong idea. I'm just saying that I don't understand the motivation. But then again, this did come along a while back, so it could just be that maybe at the time it made sense compared to now. Brad says, why would you want to integrate with Mac OS? Yeah, exactly. When I'm on Mac, when I rarely have to use it for testing something, I just have a full screen Emacs and just pretend that I'm in Linux. If you use eShell and Dired and everything else in Emacs, you can basically just forget that the other UI exists. Whoops, let's see. Let's get out of this now. Okay, now we're gonna get into more present day. So Remax, I'm sure many of you have heard of this effort that happened starting in 2017. And this announcement post by, I think Wilfred's last name is Hughes. We'll see in just a second whenever the page finally decides to load up. Yeah, Wilfred Hughes. You know, I think Wilfred has contributed some other things in the Emacs community, but there was an effort to rewrite the core, the C language core of Emacs in Rust instead. And one of the primary ideas there is you would make Emacs more stable because you would use the properties of the Rust systems programming language to avoid things like accessing memory locations that are out of bounds for the process, or accessing unallocated memory locations inside the bounds of the process, or anything like that would cause a program crash. So I think another issue here that they actually brought up, which is something I had mentioned before, is that they wanted to have an opportunity to develop in a more modern workflow, like with GitHub, etc. Let's see. Naturally, we also provide Emacs propaganda, Rust propaganda, and a Travis-based workflow on GitHub. So basically, they wanted to make it easier to contribute to Emacs, but at the same time, rewrite the core. Also, Osloy, yeah, probably, if you posted a link, it probably did get deleted because YouTube loves to do that. Okay, I swear to God, this microphone, I'm going to throw it out the window. Here we go. So, back to what I was saying. Rewriting Emacs in Rust, in theory, would have the effect that people who are interested in writing Rust would actually want to come contribute, because all you're doing is translating code from one language to another. You're not really having to write new code entirely. However, I think that the actual task of doing this is a lot bigger than the ambition of the people who are able to do it, and also very difficult because if you do want to stay up to date with the latest changes to the Emacs source code, I mean, I guess that the C code in Emacs probably isn't changing super rapidly, but it's changing enough that you would have to have people who know how to translate the changes to the latest Emacs C code to the new Rust code. So keeping up with that would be a nightmare, in my opinion. So you would either have to completely fork Emacs and have a different implementation for things, or you would have to spend a lot of effort trying to keep that porting up to date. And I think they actually did make quite a lot of progress in porting a good amount of Emacs core source to Rust. Let's see, Remax development progress. I had seen some blog posts at some point, I don't know who wrote them, about, let's see, is that, no. Porting E-lisp functions, continued progress porting Emacs to Rust. Let's see, this may be the post I saw. This is in 2018. There were some graphs. Yeah, I think this is probably the post that I had seen back then. So there was a lot of information about, the work involved to port Emacs to Rust. And, people tried for a long time to make this happen. Did I just see the word Satan? Okay, so basically this macro declares a static variable called Satan. All right, that's interesting. Let me drop this in here. But ultimately, I think it became too difficult to continue on with this port because it is, like I said, very difficult to maintain a source port to another language whenever the code base is very old and the source is large, and especially a project like this is very complicated. I mean, you're basically rewriting an entire Lisp interpreter, bytecode compiler, and then trying to make sure that all of the Emacs Lisp code written on top of that still works the same way. Dirk says, Remax is my very first open source contribution. That's cool. I didn't know that. And I kind of want to go work on it for fun. I mean, it could be fun if you wanted to work on a Lisp interpreter written in Rust. But right now, I think that the people who were involved with working on Remax have moved on to other things. And there's another fork we'll talk about in a second, which may be the future of this effort in general. But on the Remax repo, if you go to GitHub and check out that repo, they basically have a deprecation announcement saying that the project isn't maintained anymore. And if you're looking for a Rust-based Emacs fork, you can take a look at Emacs NG. However, this fork is not about replacing the C code base, but to provide additional features using the rich ecosystem of Rust. So, in the end, probably what you realize is that maintaining a parallel fork of Emacs is very difficult if you're trying to keep up to date with the functionality that's being added, especially if you make any changes whatsoever to the core code, because then you have to start mentally mapping the changes from the original source to the new source and keep that going over time, which would be a major headache in my opinion. So yeah, I think that it just fizzled out because of that whole reason. And there were a lot of smart people who were working on this project, so they gave it a real fair shot, and it didn't work out. So I think that's the reason why Emacs NG came about, and this was a newer effort to, like it said before, to make it so that you can hook Rust into Emacs, and probably like what Ashraz says, like write Emacs modules in Rust rather than rewriting everything. Ronnie says, would Remax make Emacs multi-threaded? Not inherently. I mean, it might make things easier to do multi-threading because you would have greater guarantees about not sharing memory that's being used across threads, but you still have to deal with the fact that Emacs itself was not written to be multi-threaded. So the Emacs Lisp layer also has to play along when it comes to multi-threading. So the goal of Emacs NG is to explore new development approaches. And that's a very important sentence, because the point here is not only that the new development approach is to bring in JavaScript and Rust, but it's also to develop Emacs on GitHub and not using a mailing list driven workflow, which is something that people have time and time again complained about on Emacs Devel, basically saying that it's very hard for new contributors to contribute to Emacs because you have to use patches over email. Now, yes, it is alien to people who are using GitHub or GitLab these days, because the pull request workflow, where you can basically just go click a button and create a pull request, is very easy, and also makes a lot of sense to people who haven't used email-driven patch workflow. But I don't think it is necessarily more complicated. I think it's just a different way of doing things, and if you learn the tools just like you learned GitHub, you would be able to do it just fine. However, a lot of people are convinced that the one thing that's holding Emacs back from getting more contributions is not being on a Git forge like GitHub. And I don't really believe that's 100% true. I think there's multiple reasons why more people aren't contributing to Emacs. So you can't really point out this as the one reason. However, it's nice that these people who are working on this project want to have people collaborate on GitHub, because it will make it easier for them to get contributions. And since their goal isn't to rewrite Emacs, but to sort of plug in some other platforms into Emacs, I think it's a lot more likely that they're going to have healthy contributions because they're on GitHub and because there's things they're doing that might be interesting to a subset of the Emacs community. Now, one thing they are trying to do, which I don't know how much I really empathize with, I guess, is trying to bring in Dino and JavaScript as another extension language for Emacs. And I guess the assumption there is that if you enable other languages that are not Emacs Lisp, then more people might write packages. But how many times have you seen a program or community try to attract new people by just bolting on something for the purpose of attracting new people? If you want to attract new people, make the program attractive. Don't necessarily try to attract them with sort of, in my opinion, arbitrary is the wrong word, but sort of like choices that are, it's like populist choices. You know, you're basically trying to appeal to people for the sake of appealing to people. Maybe these people want to write JavaScript in Emacs, or maybe they want to write Rust modules. Writing Rust modules totally makes sense. If you want to write a C module in Rust and plug it in Emacs, totally makes sense. But writing JavaScript code to to customize Emacs or to write a package for Emacs does not make a whole lot of sense to me. So, I definitely want to keep an eye on what this project does over time, because maybe I'm just missing the point. But in my opinion, I think everyone's time would be better spent trying to contribute to Emacs. Now, it could just be the fact that it's hard for people to contribute to Emacs because there's a certain culture on Emacs Devel, or a certain development mentality in the Emacs community, or the actual GNU Emacs community, that makes it harder for people to feel welcome to contribute. And I could understand there. But since I haven't personally tried to go and contribute, I don't really know what that's like. So, I don't know. Culture and community does matter a lot when it comes to whether people feel like they want to contribute to something. And a lot of times these projects that show up are partly to solve the problem of people don't feel welcome or comfortable contributing somewhere, so they create their own place to do what they want to do. And that's fine. You know, if that's the goal, that's great. Because honestly, if people are contributing to a project, they're going to learn, and they may grow into contributors in other projects as well, even Emacs core itself. So I'm not going to discourage anybody from contributing to a project just because I don't necessarily understand the point. Let me go back. I missed some things here. Shabam says, I honestly think Emacs needs something like NeoVim. Before NeoVim, Vim was single-threaded, didn't have integrated terminal, etc. But since NeoVim has these things, have been included in Vim as well. Well, that's what forks can do sometimes. They can sort of encourage the maintainers of the original program to start accepting certain changes, but and it has happened with Emacs. I think XEmacs actually did cause certain things to happen in Emacs that would not have happened as fast. So yeah, I mean, that could be something that would be a motivating factor. And even you could say the Emacs native comp functionality was done in a fork, but it wasn't a fork that was being promoted as a standalone Emacs. It was still GNU Emacs, and the fork was meant to be used as GNU Emacs. So I think that if you wanted to fork Emacs to spike an effort to add better multi-threading, etc., I mean, honestly, it makes sense. However, depending on how large the changes are, it's a lot more risky that they won't be accepted. You know, it's kind of a miracle that the native compilation functionality did get merged into Emacs, because that is wide-ranging changes, major changes. If you were to do the same thing for threading, that would also be pretty wide-ranging changes, because there are assumptions made in a lot of Emacs code that Emacs is effectively single-threaded, and if you start adding multiple threads in, then there's a lot of new semantics and features that have to be introduced to ensure that. I could be wrong about that, but doing it in a fork could work. You could definitely work with a team of people to develop something like that, but merging it back into Emacs is a whole other story, because it could be just complex to get that code reviewed or approved. Let's see. Ashraz says, GNU Emacs cannot take contributions from the fork due to FSF copyright assignment. That might lead to yet another schism if FSF cannot accept more, provide more workforce on Emacs. That's also another problem. If the contributors to a fork want to merge code back in and cannot actually sign or get the copyright assignment form filled out and submitted, especially if they have an employer that might block that, then that code can't come back in. Benoit says mutation will be an impediment to multi-threading. Yes, exactly. JH says, I think E-lisp is easier to pick up than Rust. I also agree. Windup Boy says Git has an email command built right in. Yes, I think a lot of people don't know that. You can definitely send patches from email. Sorry, you can send email patches from Git. Let's see. Arya says Linus is opposed to it too, or Linus, I guess is the way you pronounce his name. Benoit says copyright assignment is maybe a bigger issue than the forge. So now Windup Boy is saying, oh God, no. I don't know exactly what that was referring to. GitHub isn't a free forge. Yeah, JH says web developers are going to use Emacs just because they can write a package in JS. Yeah, it's not going to really attract web developers, I think. Marduk says Lua did somewhat improve NeoVim, but I don't think E-lisp is that bad, to be honest. If it helps more people use it, then why not? Honestly, E-lisp is not a bad language. I don't know, people give it a lot of grief for some reason. Frankly, I think that it's flexible enough to do a lot of very, very interesting things. If you've seen any packages, like let's say orc mode, Magit, and many, many, many other packages, like you can do a lot with Emacs Lisp. I don't see why people think that it's such a crap language. And you also have all the common Lisp compatibility stuff in there too, if you want something that's more like, you know, a full featured language. Elephant says, a non-trivial amount of the appeal of Emacs is sort of a Lisp machine. I can modify any aspect of it using Lisp and global scope. Multiple language module support breaks that. Yes, exactly. Like, it needs to be a Lisp machine. It needs to be a Lisp environment. Windup Boy says, GNU Savannah needs to grow some Forge features. GNU Savannah needs a complete facelift, and if they could make GNU Savannah more like GitHub or even Source Hut, I think that it would be a lot better for GNU projects. Because Savannah, if anybody goes to the Savannah website, they're like, why am I in 2002? Let's see. Ashra says, Git format patch handles almost all of the email stuff. And there's also Magit capital W. I did not know about that. I was actually looking for something like that. You only need to send it afterwards to the right recipient mailing list. Oh yeah, I forgot about the XEmacs fork. Seems like the best fork because all it asks is for us to unify a Lisp VM project instead of creating a Rust E-lisp. However, that is one that also did not really succeed. I don't know, is it still being developed currently? Windup Boy says, I was referring to Emacs modes in JavaScript. Yeah, I don't think many of us think that's a good idea. Let's see. Case says, I was doing the advent of code last year with Emacs Lisp. Yeah, that's a good way to do it. Let's see, what else? Crazy Chicken says, with that being said, I was watching over your E-lisp tutorials and they're great. Thank you. All right, so what is the next thing I wanted to discuss here? So that's Emacs NG. And then the last one I want to talk about today is one that sort of just sprung up recently. It's called Commercial Emacs. I think this is actually a cheeky title. I don't think it's actually meant to be a commercial version of Emacs. But I think this is also another one that is geared towards solving the development modernization problem, or at least the perceived problem with Emacs, where the lack of contributions, or the perceived lack of contributions, is coming from the fact that things are done via email and not by something like GitHub. So this is a fork done by someone named Dick Mao, if I'm pronouncing their name correctly. And the repo README says that why this is the oft-ideated, never sublimated Forge repository for Emacs. So basically saying, like, we're trying to bring Emacs source base to a Git Forge to make it easier to contribute. As it is hosted on a site using non-free software, the work herein is not the official GNU Emacs source and does not entreat the FSF to enforce its license. So basically saying they don't really care about contributions being licensed back to the FSF. So if you wanted a place to contribute to a fork of Emacs where it's meant to be a fork of Emacs and not some other sort of bolt-on project, then this is a place you could do that. But always, you have to consider the fact that you're going to be going off on a tangent where these things that you make are not going to go back into Emacs itself. So if this project ever fails, then you're left with a non-maintained project that is going to be incompatible with the latest changes to Emacs. So there's a risk to using this if you aren't very, very sort of in line with the motivation of the person who created this repo. One thing they are doing is automatically merging commits from the GNU Emacs repository back into this repo. So the idea is to keep it up to date as much as possible. However, at the same time, they are making core changes. Like they've rewritten GNUs to be non-blocking. So if you've ever used GNUs before, if it starts fetching email or mail from a news group, it does sort of hang Emacs a little bit. So now it's non-blocking. They've also rewritten process.c. Not exactly sure what was needed there. And also they added some features to the global mark ring, which I think I've heard people complain about this because it doesn't provide jump back functionality. And I was showing the mark ring in one of the videos I was doing, and I think I had some issues with it. So I guess I can kind of understand. But yeah, it's still, you know, like I said, you'd be using a fork of Emacs that has an uncertain future and has differences between the actual stable GNU Emacs or in development GNU Emacs and then whatever this has in it. And then he answers the question, isn't this XEmacs all over again? And basically says, if I could only reach those heights, but by some miracle it did, the choices for the FSF are the same as before. Enlist RMS to embark on a coding frenzy that achieves feature parity, or grant Dick coding commit rights, or continue not noticing me. I don't really know what not noticing me means. I don't know if it's a matter of feeling like they're not being listened to on the mailing list or whatever, but I don't know. I mean, whether or not somebody's listening to you could just be, it might be that they don't really agree with you, or it could be that your communication is not amenable to agreement. So some people should also consider that they should take a different approach if they're not being listened to or noticed, I guess. But I personally have not seen any of the discussions that have led up to this, so I have no idea, I have no context, so I'm not really passing any judgment. I'm just sort of giving my opinion on what I am interpreting from the statement that I just read. Let's see, what do you mean by commercial? I would have called this the less invidious sounding non-GNU Emacs after non-GNU ELPA, which, like the present endeavor, was created to circumvent FSS strictures, thereby giving it the procedural latitude. We're getting into some very academic language here. You know, some, what do they call them? 10-cent words? I don't know. There's some phrase for that. To compete with MELPA for attention, obviously not dollars, but describing something by what it is not breaks some basic marketing rule. Is an abortion rights opponent pro-life or pro-choice? That was a tangent. So, yeah, I guess it's just being cheeky, I think. And also, it's sort of attention grabbing. Why aren't non-patch bugs being mirrored into issues? So something that is also being done here is I think issues are being mirrored. Non-patch. So patches are being mirrored into issues. If you look at the issues list, what's happening here? I don't know. Oh, people are filing issues, but I think pull requests. The patches are going into pull requests. Now we're bringing up Richard Stallman's past transgressions for cannibalism, I guess you could call it. I think it made that sound worse than it really was, but it's still pretty disgusting. Anyway, so a bug report accompanied by a patch, on the other hand, is a sure sign that the reporter made an effort to understand the problem. Okay, so basically it seems that pull requests are being mirrored over from patches. So anyway, if you want to try to clone this and build it, it's probably the same as building Emacs itself. So you can give it a shot if you wanted to, and you can contribute here to this project if you're interested in helping Dick Mao to achieve their goal. Yeah, auto cannibalism. That's the right way to say it. We're working up to. Well, I'm not going to go farther in that joke. Some things should not be said on stream. So let's see. And also there's a quote here in the about, evil will always triumph because good is dumb. Well, yeah, I guess it's something you would say in a very satirical movie, but not necessarily in real life. So that's basically it. I mean, obviously there's a lot more variations on Emacs. If you look at the page that I pulled up before, yeah, this page at finseth.com, there's a lot of information here about the various different forks or implementations, you could say, of Emacs. And there's links to things. There's also stuff like, if you ever saw these like teach yourself something in 24 hours books, apparently there was a book from Sam's about, you know, teach yourself Emacs in 24 hours. I probably saw that at the bookstore when I was searching for books whenever I was, you know, in high school and college, and probably did not actually, you know, pick it up. But at that time, I wasn't really paying attention to text editors. I was more just interested in Linux in general. Too gross for David to repeat on stream. Yeah, well, you know, sometimes I can make some jokes that are only for me to laugh. So I won't subject you to those. Donald Duck says, keep it real.
What?
XEmacs. I didn't actually cover that one. Or is it TechMax? But basically a distribution of Emacs for writing LaTeX, which I'm sure some people who have done scientific papers have probably used that. Anyway, let's see. Anything else interesting to talk about today? I mean, let's see. We've got about, what, 10 minutes from the normal stream ending time. I could jump to some Emacs news real fast and see if we find anything that's interesting. Let's see. Such a chew. Whoa, what did I just do? Emacs news. SMS Max developed over text message. Well, I guess you could say that email may qualify for that too. Maybe that's what Emacs means, really. It's email max. Or Emacs, email ax. Let's see, there's a beginner's guide. I'm just gonna see if there's anything that stands out to me really quickly. Create minimal Emacs environments with a shell script. This is something that could be useful to people, especially people like me who have to sometimes try out different Emacs configs real fast. I mean, I use Chemex too for that these days, but this could be something that might be useful if you don't really need Chemex. Also, I think Alpha Papa has a script for that. Was it Emacs Sandbox? I'm pretty sure. Yeah, Emacs Sandbox.sh. I've tried it before. That also works. Update. What does that say? Notes update. Okay, it's like a notes file. So yeah, that's something you could use if you wanted to. And list down the configurations I'm using. So Emacs development, they're actually, making some improvements to ERC, which is cool because I've used ERC every day now, as do the rest of us who hang out in the System Crafters IRC channel. Check out systemcrafters.chat if you want more information about how to join there. We've had quite a lot of activity there the last few days, which has been awesome. Honor default file modes, okay. New minor mode, show paren local mode. What does that do? Local counterpart for show paren mode, allowing you to toggle it separately in different buffers. Oh, can't just do that with a buffer local variable? So, Alpha Pop has been working on a new package called Taxi, which is kind of interesting. It's kind of like a hierarchical view. So if you want to look into that, you can look at taxi.el Alpha Papa. I'll do some videos on some of Alpha Papa's stuff at some point in the relatively near future. But that's something you can look at if you want to see some new stuff that's coming down the package development pipe, whatever you want to call it. I need to go back to where I was. QBrowser is failing me these days. I don't know what all these red arrows are that I keep getting. Oh, someone actually used this one weird trick language in their blog post. That's funny. I was just making fun of that yesterday. Quickly annotate your machine learning dataset with one weird trick. It's Lisp. Ah, okay. That title looked familiar for some reason, but I couldn't figure out why. Emacs is more than a text editor. Is that a video? 3 minutes long? We're not going to watch it. I'm just curious who made it. Maybe made by Habib Khan. If you want to check that out, 3-minute video. System E. People keep bringing that up. Oh, there's a Hacker News thread. We got to see this. When I was using EXWM, it felt like the closest I've ever been to Emacs as an operating system, but why would I want something like that in the first place? Why wouldn't you want something like that in the first place? Tell me that. Not just being able to control my desktop in a keyboard-driven manner with shortcuts I'm familiar with, because from what I hear, GNOME desktops are pretty keyboard-driven. It's the idea of being able to control my entire operating system. It's fun to try to get there with Emacs sometimes, even if in my heart I know it's not what it's meant to do. Well, can't really say that because you can do it. So this is not necessarily stable today. Okay, cool. People are talking about geeks here. I'm not seeing any flame wars yet, so that's a good sign. Yeah, okay, so Gorilla brings up the right point. For something more serious, there's GNU Shepherd, which is written in Guile. So yeah, System E is a joke. It's not real. I mean, you could probably use it, but it's, if you look at the code, I don't think that it's actually meant to be used as an actual init system. What people are saying, yeah, okay. To quote Strongbad, this is impressive, disturbing, and makes me uncomfortable. It's called a joke, guys. The README is literally full of them. Yeah, I mean, they're making it pretty clear. This is not meant to be taken seriously. But I guess the point of posting it on Hacker News wasn't to say it's for real. It's just to, you know, bring it up for discussion. Brad Cameron says, what's the difference between Lisp and E-lisp? Serious question. Apparently hasn't synced yet. Well, E-lisp is a dialect of Lisp, inspired by Common Lisp. Lisp is more of an idea that has multiple dialects, like Common Lisp, Clojure, Scheme, the many variations of Scheme as well. So the Lisp is more of an idea where you basically write your code using the core data structures of the environment. So you write your code using lists, and there are rules about how those lists are evaluated based on whether the first atom or symbol in the list gets used as the symbol for a function, and the rest of the atoms in the list are used as parameters of that function. And, you know, basically whatever the reader decides are the rules for evaluation is how it gets evaluated. So anyway. Ashprat said, had someone at the door. What did I miss besides System E after commercial Emacs? We're just scanning through the Emacs news for this week. Ankit says, just saw GNU Shepherd. That seems cool. GNU Shepherd is pretty nice. I use it in GNU Geeks. I also use it for my user level system service management. So, in fact, if I run Daemons right now, which is a package for Emacs, it's talking to my local user level Shepherd here. And you can see that I have Pulse Audio, SyncThing, Mcron, GPG Agent, all running as daemons inside of Shepherd. And if you look at my system configuration, I think it's in here. Let's see, Pulse. No. It's in .config / shepherd / init.scm. So I basically have service definitions for the services I want to run in my user account. So it's pretty cool. Eric says there's a Lisp implementation written in E-lisp. It's called Make a Lisp. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. I mean, like, Make a Lisp is like write a Lisp in every language, basically. Ankit says, is it linked with Geekso, or will I be able to use it on other distros? Well, whether you can use it as an init system on other distros, I don't know. It's not specifically linked to Geeks in that it depends on Geeks, so you should be able to if you wanted to, but it might take some work. Yuka says, I think that most old Lisps have dynamic variable binding. Most new Lisps have less lexical variable binding. Well, Scheme definitely has lexical scoping by default. Common Lisp, I'm not sure. I think outside of a let, maybe they're dynamic. Maybe inside of a let, they're lexical. I don't know. I need to go look into Common Lisp again. Brad says, does anyone speak with a Lisp while writing Lisp? No. But I do yell at parentheses balancing quite often. So maybe I will accidentally Lisp while I'm raging in anger at not being able to find where I've not closed my parentheses. That's Amore say, we're also meta. Kay says, Alpha Papa is another person it would be cool to interview. Yeah, I'm going to have Alpha Papa on the stream at some point. Jason says, what browser are you using? It's a Qt browser. I just have it set up so that every tab is its own window rather than having all tabs in the same window. So that allows me to have my Qt browser tabs as buffers in Emacs, and I can switch between them, as you can see down here at the bottom of the screen. All right, I think that's everything for today. I don't have anything else, but Brad says shouting at parens is natural behavior. Yeah, well, you know, you can shout at parens, or you can use something like Lispy or paredit, and then you can shout at Lispy and paredit instead. So Jason Root asked what window manager. This is EXWM. It's the Emacs window manager. So, all right, I think that's it for today. Thank you all so much for being here. I appreciate you listening to me ramble on about history that I only experienced part of. But, you know, hopefully this was interesting to sort of see what the space of Emacs has been like over the years and maybe have some perspectives on that. If you have any further thoughts about that, please leave a note in the comments, either on this video or the previous one. I'm gonna have to link these two videos together somehow because obviously I screwed up and killed the stream halfway through. But you know, hopefully that won't happen again. I'll be careful next time, I promise. Whoa, yeah, it scared me, dude. Anyway, somebody asked a question. Recently watched the new shell video. Are you planning to continue on that series? Yeah, I'll work with JT again at some point in the future. Like some of these things I like to spread out a little bit so that we don't do the same thing every week. But then again, I do the same thing every week for other stuff, so mea culpa. But in this case, we'll do it again in a little while, I think. All right, so let's see. The link to the show notes will be in the description once I get that posted up. Should be right after the stream. And as always, like the video. I guess like this one and maybe the previous one too, if you haven't liked that one, because obviously I split them in half now. And check out the links below in the description for how you can support the channel if you're so interested to do so. But you know, leaving a like and subscribing to the channel is the best way to do that. So I appreciate it if anybody does. And yeah, until next week, thanks so much. Next week, I think I'm gonna have a video out. I'm not sure which one it's gonna be yet. I'm sort of like nearing the end of the org roam videos I wanted to do, so I might start switching to some other topics a little bit. So we'll see. I might do a video on something different this week. So maybe we'll find out how that's gonna go over the weekend. But as always, we'll be back on Wednesday and Friday for more streams. So check those out whenever they get scheduled. And until next time, thanks so much for watching. Have a great weekend and happy hacking. We'll see you next time.